This is the Clark Connection Podcast, your weekly dose of inspiration and power. We'll dive deep into the stories and strategies that ignite personal growth and entrepreneurial fire. Join us as we empower you to take control, level up your leadership, and build the life you deserve. Get ready to rise, to thrive, and to finally become the leader of your own destiny. Let's go.
Welcome to the Clark Connection Podcast. Great to have you on here. I'm your host, Aaron Clark, aka Coach Clark, the coach. Glad to have you on here. I'm super excited to get into that episode where we go through what lessons I've learned from coaching, specifically leadership lessons that I've learned from coaching. And it's a lot of great stuff. And, in the previous episode, we're going to talk about personal growth, leadership, and entrepreneurs. And we're going to continue that because I told you I wanted to do that on this episode. And so they're just kind of going through how I got started, and then talking about, how to actually structure and put together an organization, to actually being a leader and building a team. There's a lot of great information to go through on this episode. But look, before we get going, I've got to thank my sponsors. I want to give a huge shout out to Wayne with 7K Metal Associates. Give him a call, hit him up if you're looking to protect, gain, or even just start collecting gold and silver. Wayne's a great person. Tell him Coach Clark called you. All of his information is in the description below. They also got to thank Bobby with Comfy Quest LLC. Hit her up about getting a craniosacral massage or a lymphatic drain massage. She is excellent. You will not regret it. Tell her Coach Clark told you to give you a call. And she's giving you a 10% discount on that service. Also got to thank Andrew with Automate Integrate Business Professional Services. They hit him up for all of your business solution needs that you've got. And look, everybody's description is all below in how to get in touch with them. It's below. So let's dive in. Let's get started. And so one thing that I do believe is that youth sports is one of the best places for people to grow and learn as a leader. Okay. And so that is where I got my first original start as a coach. And I believe that this is a great place for you to learn, especially as a young leader, because it forces you to learn how to communicate with people, but it also forces you to learn how to get the parents on the same page as you. Vital and extremely important as we go throughout our development, because getting people to go and walk alongside of you as you go through a journey is super important. And so keep that in mind. That's why I love sports. I love that it stretches you. It forces you out of your comfort zone. Okay. And so one thing that's great about it too is nobody's calling the school board, the local media, anything if you don't win a 9 and 10-year-old game. They will complain if you don't bring the juice box, or if somebody doesn't bring snacks for after the game. They'll complain about that, but they're not complaining about wins and losses. And so you get to try out a lot of different things and make sure you're seeking out those sources. And so for me personally, it all started when I was really young. I always knew I wanted to play football and be a football coach. Ever since I can remember, maybe 6 or 7 years old, that was when I knew I wanted to get involved in this. And then my first real coaching job, not really real, but the first coaching job that I had was I helped my brother. My brother was an extremely good baseball player, and we spent hours working on his swing, working on his pitching, working on fielding, and everything that it takes to be a great baseball player. And he was always in any league and team that he was on, one of the top guys. And I was so committed and seeing how he was doing, that so much so that I would more so while I was playing my games, I'd be asking my mom, hey, what's he doing? Go tell me what he's doing. And so it really started there. That did that all throughout high school. Went and played college ball. I told y'all all this on the other one. And once I finally got out of college, that was when I got my first official, I'm going to air quotes, official coaching gig at Central High School. Was able to get hired by a phenomenal leader and mentor, that guy guy named Sid Edwards. That Sid is great. And look, I was super fortunate in these first coaching experiences of mine, and really at all of my locations, that to have some great mentors that and coaches who wanted to see me grow, that as a person, they wanted to see me become a great man. It wasn't about being a great coach. That they understood that if I became a great man, I would become a great coach. And if I became a great coach, that because I was a great man, I would help my players to become great men, great women, great leaders, and so on and so forth. And the cycle would continue. And so that's what they were mostly focused on, was helping me to do that. And it was at my first stop that where I really got in here. And I really got spoiled while I was at my that first job, because we won a lot, and that I took for granted how hard it is to actually win. You know, that and it's extremely difficult to go and put your definition on winning and being successful. It's hard to go out and win games. It's hard to go out and build a successful team and a successful business. And so when I got thrown in, I was just like, man, this is how it is. This is what you do, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I was first starting out coaching, that all I had to do was bring energy. And when you messed up, I just yelled. you know, Equal opportunity yeller. I just brought a lot of energy to the game, to the sport, and that was my contribution on the team. I didn't know a whole lot about anything else, and so I really consider it when I finally learned how to coach. And so this is important, because I think we do this a lot as leaders and business owners and entrepreneurs, that we really take for granted that our team, the people that are working with us, that they don't know what we know. And so it wasn't until I got to Walker High School that I truly learned how to be a coach, that I truly learned how to be a mentor. Because when I got there, look, guys, I'll tell you, we were not good by any stretch of the imagination. That we were not good. And I'll never forget that we're in boot camp. We're in the two-a-days. And man, the offense, and I coached defensive backs. I was an assistant coach on the defensive side. It was the first time being a varsity coach. And so I'd always been the freshman coach that helped with some JV stuff, and then had like varsity responsibilities on the sideline on Friday nights, but was always a freshman coach. And so this was the first place that I was a varsity coach. So I had arrived, and I knew it all because I was now a varsity coach. But we're out in the scrimmage, and we're working on a specific coverage. The coverage we're working on is cover 2, and I'm going to bore you guys the details. But my safety that was getting, I mean, he got beat like 3 or 4 plays in a row. It could have been 5 plays in a row. I don't remember. That I'm embarrassed because I'm the defensive back coach, and we are getting torched for long touchdown passes. And so this one happens, and I'm just on him. I'm like, what is your responsibility? What is your responsibility? What is your response? Why did you not do this? And I'm like in his face, like we're up close and personal on this, and I can see he's starting to boil over. He's just getting mad, and you can feel, like, I mean, those of you are watching, you will see, like, I could really see the face getting tense. And he finally goes, Coach, what does it matter what number 1 is doing? That he lines up on the other side of the field, and we don't have a number 2 on the team. So I don't understand why you keep telling me we're reading 2-1. We don't have a number 2. There is no receiver number 2, and there's no, and number 1, the guy wearing number 1, he's all the way on the other side of the field. And man, it stopped me in my tracks. I had nothing to say. And for those of you who have coached or something, or you've played sports, when you stump a coach, you've done something, because we always got something smart to say back. And I just remember stopping, and I had to I walked off the field. Like, I started walking off the field, my head coach is yelling at me. And he's like, "You gotta take that. Now you better get back over there and get." And I'm giving him a hands like, "Stop." Just, I'm like hands and I walk over to the bench like I've just been kicked off the field. I go sit on the bench and he's coming over and my head's down, that I'm like leaned over, like I'm reevaluating like what's going on, because I didn't get it until that point that my players didn't understand how to count wide receivers. They didn't know the game of football. I had taken for granted that what I learned that at my previous schools, that where they had already been taught all this stuff. How often do we do that as leaders, though? That we assume that just because I know what's going on with my company, with my business, with my team, that I know how to do this, but they don't know how to do this. They don't even know that knowledge. That because at that point in the game, I had been in football for 10 to 15 years at this point. I had experienced a lot of football. That in playing college football taught me so much more than most of those guys knew. And I took for granted that they didn't know what I know. And so it's super important that as a leader, that we teach our teammates, that those who are working with us, that whether you're the CEO of the company, whether you're the head coach, that whether you're running your own business and have 2 or 3 employees working with you, that we've got to teach them that to know what we need to know. And so it was super valuable because that was where I learned that previously I was just a boss. I was just a boss. And a boss is just somebody that they instill fear and they feel and they yell and they scream and they don't really get a great thing out of people. But a leader gets those who are following them to love them, that they work with them, and that people they will go great lengths for those that they love. Now, if they hate you, they're not gonna. They'll do what you tell them. They're gonna punch in at 9. They're gonna punch out at 5. That people go above and beyond for those that they love, and that's what we're wanting to do. We have to show as a leader that we appreciate and love them. That through this, and so that was where I learned how to not be a boss anymore, and to become a leader and go through it with them. That's what a leader does. A leader says, look, I'm going to join arms with you and I'm going to do it with you. It's not enough for me to just do it and tell you to do it. I'm going to get there with you and we will do it together. The huge. Also, it was during this time that I got my first the opportunity to be a high school head coach. I was the head coach of the boys soccer team. And man, we were bad. Oh my goodness, we were bad. um, and it was because I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about being a leader. I was still discovering a lot of things about this. And so we just kind of showed up and we played and man, whew, we were bad. Now, in year 2, I started to figure it out. That was when I started to figure out that you had to put some structure together. You had to put an organization. You had to have an outline, a manual, whatever you want to call it, for people to go and follow and have rules and regulations. And sometimes some of those things that happen that meant that you sit out 3 of your starters for a game because they broke the team rules. That you start realizing how to hold a people accountable and they really start respecting you for it. That's one thing I think leaders fear a lot. And as you move up in management and supervisor roles, etc., people are really fearful. They want people to like them. Well, look, they don't have to like you. Like Kobe Bryant said it one of the best ways, that if you want to make people happy, don't be a leader. Leader hold people accountable. And you're going to make people mad. So if you want to make people happy, go do something. Don't be a leader. And that's what we got to do as leaders. And we're all fearful of that. I want people to like me, but they will respect you when you say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And then you actually go do it. They like to see that after my time at Walker. My next stop was I went back to Central High School. I got the opportunity to go and work. I knew I was going to be working 2 to 3 days a week whenever I was offered this job at my son's school. And those of you who are entrepreneurs, business owners, high up executives, you understand, other coaches, you understand how little you actually get to see your family. You're away from your family a ton when you're in those roles. And to me, that was just an awesome opportunity to get to be able to see my son. And not necessarily every single day, but I was seeing him 2 to 3 times a week. And those were 2 to 3 times that I wasn't getting to see him. It was awesome. I was also at that time that moved to the offensive side of the ball. That had another great mentor there and leader that I worked with, David Semino. That David is a grinder, and David wouldn't accept anything from the best from you. That I absolutely cherished that time that I got to work with David Semino because he taught me so much. He probably got tired of me because I had no clue what was going on. It probably took me until about week 5 to figure out offense, and I was doing fullbacks, H-backs, and tight ends. And wow, if you don't understand offensive linemen and how blocking schemes work, that's a tough position to coach. But it helped to develop me into the coach that I've become through that process. Absolutely loved it. But also one thing that I got from David, I told you he was a grinder, and he held everybody to a high standard of excellence. He wasn't going to allow you to get away with anything but your best. And that included his coaches. And it taught me a lot on how to hold your people accountable without just being a jerk. That David did, and he's doing a great job still today. I absolutely loved being able to work there. I also got my second job as a head coach. This was my second time to figure out how to be a head coach. And it was a little bit easier this time. When I was at Central High School, I was the girls soccer head coach. The girls soccer team head coach. Wow, I don't know why that was so tough to say. But it was there. I had already figured out how to do some of these things as far as like building teamwork and setting up a structure. And it was here that I really realized that I needed to make sure I had those different structural levels. And so at Central, you had on the soccer team, you had me at the top. And then what I did is I took my seniors and I made them a level, like basically managers of the team. And they got to draft players on their team, and we had points, and they made things fun. They had added to different events that we would do. And then the rest of the team was under the seniors. And so the only people that had direct access to me were my seniors. So my seniors were allowed to call, text, email, whenever, to ask whatever. But I'd also taken the time, I would kind of talk with them a little bit afterwards, that not as much as I would do with later teams, but I was just really figuring it out. And so it saved a lot. It took a load off of me, because what would happen is people would at that time, and if you're a coach doing something else, you get a ton of text, emails, calls, and it's like, oh my gosh, do people like not pay attention to anything I'm saying and doing? And having that extra level between me that freed me up to be able to focus on what I needed to do to help the team. And so they called me. I just said, did you ask your senior? And usually it was no. And I said, good, call them. Parents would call me and I'd say, hey, did you get your kid to call their senior? Usually it was no. Great, call them. And then the senior would ask me and relay that information. And it really saved a lot of time. Now, it wasn't until I switched to East Ascension High School. And here, I was glad to get the opportunity to go back on the defensive side of the ball. I got to learn from a great mentor. There had 2 really good mentors there, Paul Bourgeois and Darnell Lee. Great guys. But I also, and this is where I really perfected that inner game and learning how to get that through to my players to get them to play in the zone a whole lot. Now, my players were loose, and a lot of it was judging on effort. I judged my players on that effort because I wanted them to know that I wanted them to go out and give 100%. And if that was when I started to chew on you, is if you didn't give me 100%, I chewed on you for that, not for messing up, not for doing something else. But if you didn't give us 100%, you were going to get known about, because I wasn't going to accept less than your best effort. And that was how we became to grow as a unit. But then the same thing as whenever I got to be the head coach of the bowling. And this is, look, really started learning levels of leadership right here. That as the head bowling coach of East Ascension. And you probably might be thinking right now, hold on, bowling's a team sport. And I thought the exact same thing. So when I got to EA, they told me I was going to be either an assistant baseball coach or the assistant with track. And I was like, awesome. Don't have that head coach responsibility. But they came to me right before school started and said, hey, we need a bowling coach. We want you to be the bowling coach. Can you be the bowling coach? And I was like, what? Bowling? And that's why you see so much of the EA bowling stuff behind me. But I was like, hold on. So like bowling, you're inside in a bowling alley, right? And they're like, well, yeah, it's bowling. I said, so like on days that it's cold outside and days that it's raining, that you're inside, you're not cold and wet. And they're like, well, coach, you're in a bowling alley. And I said, well, what about on days that, when it's hot outside, that you're inside, you're cool. They're like, yeah, you're in a bowling alley, coach, again. And I was like, can I bowl with the players? They're like, well, yeah, you run around with the team in football, you play football with them. Yeah, you can bowl with them. I was like, okay, well, what about, okay. So like I can go get a Coke and nachos and have that. And they're like, coach, it's bowling. Yes, you can do that. I was like, I am in, because to me, that was the sweetest gig. Look, that was the one thing I hated about soccer. Probably the only thing I hated about coaching soccer. It was always cold and wet, always cold and wet. You played from November to February. It was rough. No, bowling, we were inside. So it didn't matter if we were in the middle of summer, dead of winter, didn't matter. Loved that aspect. But it was here that I figured out how to quickly turn it around, because I'd already figured it out at Central High School as the girls soccer coach. We had made strides. It was here that we quickly went through. The first season was not very good. However, we went to the playoffs, and we won our first playoff game. And I remember when we won that first playoff game, I wish I could remember the school that we were playing. But in bowling, what happens is you play like your first 2 or 3 rounds in one day. And so when we won that first playoff game, my team went nuts. Like we had just won the state championship. They were ecstatic. And I'm kind of looking at my assistant coach. I'm like, what is going, like, we got to calm them down. We got another game. And she's just kind of smiling and laughing because she understands. And she said, coach, that's their first playoff game that they've ever won. And I was like, wow. And still focused, still like, hey, we got another game to go. And we did not win that second round game. We got I don't even think it was remotely close, but it was that bad. But it was here that I started really discovering the levels of leadership. And as we started to build the team and as we started to do these things, I started to notice that the next year, so that we went 3 years in a row as district champs. We played in the last 2 years. We were in the state championship game up until I believe maybe this year was the first year that they weren't in the state championship finals. It's been a huge thing when we set up that level, because then it was there that I really started to. So again, I had me at the top, the seniors, the rest of the team. But then I took it a step further. I put the juniors in charge of one freshman. They were in charge of mentoring one freshman and checking on them, see how they were doing. And then by the time they became a senior, they already knew how to lead, because they were leading junior, senior, freshman, or junior, sophomore, freshman at that point. They were the leaders of the team. And I would pull the seniors aside just almost daily, and we would talk and just go through, well, what did we see? How do we fix that? How do we do this? To allow them, to empower them to go out and change the team. But it was more important than just the team. It was, what are they going to do in life? How do you go out and affect that change outside of here. And it all ties back in to that very first job that I had as a coach, because my coaches were doing the same thing. They wanted to see me become a great man. And that was what I want for my players, is I wanted them to become great people. I wanted them to become great men and women. That to become great husbands and wives and fathers and mothers, and to be better siblings, to be the best that they could be. That's what I wanted. And winning was never the goal. But becoming a better person, they meant winning was going to come along with it. And at those levels, of the leadership that right there, that you, as you go from being a boss that to a leader, and I'll get into this later, talking about really breaking down the different levels of leadership that you are, that there are all sorts of ways for that to happen. And it has to become a focus that to make that shift, to learn, to make sure that your people know what you know before, and when you first get there, it's important that they understand your processes, your procedures. How would Coach Clark do something? And it's a glorious thing whenever when you don't have to do the routine things, they just get it done, and you're like, oh, hey, who did? And they're like, oh yeah, we knew you would want it like that, and they just do it. That it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. But that comes from you having to teach them that, and then being able to put time and energy to show appreciation to them, to show them that you love them, to show them that you care. And don't be unreachable. And, guys, those were the biggest things that I learned as a coach. That was the most important stuff that I learned as a coach. And so that we're going to continue to grow on. They go over and learn more about leadership, growth, and entrepreneurs. I'm super excited that you were on here with me today. And I hope that this has added value to you. And I will see you on the next episode of the Clark Connection Podcast. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Clark Connection Podcast, where my goal is to add value to you. Make sure you like and follow the show. You can also connect with me via my website, coachaclark.com, or on all socials at coach_A_Clark. The links are in the description. Huge thanks to my sponsors, Wayne with 7K Metal Associates, Bobby at A Comfy Quest LLC, and Andrew at Automate Integrate Professional Services. We look forward to bringing you more great content. See you next week.